Hey guys, and we are live. Gosh, I hope you guys are all catching this one because if so, that was the smoothest opening we've ever done for one of these shows. I don't know if you guys know this one, but I have had this little checklist since I started doing these live streams of like all the things I'm supposed to do. And start out with some obvious things like turn off the radio in the kitchen, tell the family that you're going to be on the air, and so they don't come in with the dog and stuff like that. And since I've been doing this one for a little bit, that list has grown so large of all the things you have to do to kick off a live stream and hopefully have it go out well. So anyway, guys, welcome to the whole thing. We have a reasonably, I think, pretty cool show today. Going to be talking about a bunch of neat stuff, and I'd also like to get your questions. So I don't have a lot of your questions stored up, so I'm just going to keep talking about the stuff I want to go on about, but honestly, your stuff is always more interesting. So send it in the chat, please. Anything you're wondering about ComicBase or anything we're talking about here, relationship problems, whatever you got going on, and we'll take it from there. Anyway, so we were coming out here from beautiful Franklin, Tennessee. The rest of the office is in San Jose, California, but I'm out down here in Franklin. For once, the apocalypse is not upon us. We have a beautiful sky out there today, and it's not raining and horrible and stuff like that. And honestly, after last time, even when we did lose power briefly during the podcast, we are now actually on like backup supply power on everything that goes to make the live stream happen. So hopefully this whole thing would go smooth as anything. All right, so let me do a quick check of the chats, make sure that's all running here. Hi from Summit Capitola. Nice to see you, Greg. What is a comic book? Yeah, get out of here. All right, cool. All right, so let's get going. All right, so the first big news of the day, we just started shipping. If you are one of our Blu-ray subscribers, you just are starting to see in your mail, if you haven't already, the Q3 Blu-rays. What the heck is the Blu-ray all about? A lot of you are asking about. So ComicBase is a fairly graphic intensive program. It started out with 297 beautiful full color graphics is the way we always used to advertise it, of comic covers on it. That was ComicBase 1.0. We are now ComicBase 20.0.3, whatever else. We are now at the latest count at 660,461 covers in the program, and we've also been bumping up the resolution as we go. They're no longer the little postage stamp ones we used to include, back when we were on the early, Mac SE and things like that. When first of all, we've always been one of those guys where, like, when CDs came out, we were like, hey, I know what we can do to fill a CD with, because we've always had the graphic images. DVDs came out with, 20 times the capacity. Again, we knew which go on CDs. It turns out ComicBase was actually with the very first program. We're in Wikipedia, or at least we were. Who knows, if you haven't checked Wikipedia this afternoon, it's maybe different. But we were the very first program for the PC to ship on Blu-ray. As a matter of fact, we were also the very first commercial PC program to ship on dual-layer Blu-ray, because when the Blu-ray format became recordable, literally like that week, we were like, guys, our massive art library, wouldn't it be great if we could shove all that stuff on one disc and not have to compress it so hard? Well, anyway, fast forward a number of years. Blu-ray honestly was one of these things. It's kind of like barcode scanners. I thought we'd move like 3 copies of them. Instead, we're now on like our 3rd set of Blu-ray, duplicator hardware, just for cranking everything out every week. Or every quarter. The deal on Blu-rays is DVDs obviously come out once a year when we ship a new version. There's they're up to 4 DVDs to handle as much content as we possibly can get onto the discs. The Blu-ray is 50 gigabytes. It's a bit more forgiving. You can get the stuff on there more easily. More importantly, though, 2 things. One is we have decided to bump the resolution on the Blu-rays up to show them at up to 4K images. So if you have a 4K monitor, 4K type of hardware to view stuff on, if you have one of our more modern scans, and there's almost 100,000 of them in this format at this point, that are full 4K image quality, they look just freaking gorgeous. So that's one thing that's unique to the Blu-rays, because we could never get the 4K stuff to fit onto even 4 DVDs. And then the other thing that's interesting about Blu-rays is that we not only, when you buy the Blu-ray Archive Edition, we not only ship you the Blu-rays, but we also ship you the entire art library 4 times a year, fully updated. And so if you do want to keep everything on your machine, we can just, literally just pop in a disc. It's up, ships out every quarter, install everything. It's a one and done kind of deal, and you've got as close as we can give you as to being on our art servers in terms of seeing the program the way we see it. Now, speaking of that, one other wrinkle to the Blu-ray Archive Edition, as opposed to the regular Archive Edition, is if you decide, yeah, guys, it's cool. You don't need to ship me a Blu-ray, especially if I, live in, say, Australia, where shipping you a Blu-ray costs a whole ton of money. We're willing to do a solid, and we will basically give you a special set of download links, but only if you tell us that we don't need to ship this to you, because it costs a fortune to ship this stuff. But we will give you a special set of download links to the BDXL versions of the program, so basically the 100 gigabyte version of the art library, which really, really looks nice. So you thought the 50 gig, a 50 gig version looked great. These things are just nuts. But realistically, we're in kind of a bind here because we're shipping so much data around on the whole thing that we're kind of caught between, like, we can't economically ship you a BDXL disc, certainly not more than once, because that's just one of these media type things where, unless you're in the business of authoring 3D Blu-ray movies or something, nobody uses it. It never really caught on. Unlike, if we need to ship you a CD, it's like, 50 cents or a buck. A BDXL is like $15 just for the media, and then God help us if we coaster it. That's before we even ship it to you. So we can't ship you a BDXL. And honestly, the bandwidth required to ship you 100 gigs of content also costs us a fair amount of money. So we'll do you one or the other. So if you are of the mood, where if you are a Blu-ray customer and you say, hey, I want to get the best I can possibly have, send a note to support@comicbase.com and say I would like to shift my subscription from shipped Blu-rays to downloaded Blu-rays. It took me a really long time to get to this point, isn't it? But if you send us that note and just say, hey, I'm a Blu-ray customer, I'd like to switch from shipped Blu-rays to downloaded, we'll send you the magical links to not only the current Blu-ray 50 gig set, but also the 100 gig BDXL set that we can never afford to actually make happen in full-on version. All right, so that is the very, very long version about Blu-rays and all things about, trucking around lots and lots of images from one place to another. All right, let me do another quick check of where we're doing on stuff. Yeah, John says, I like my Blu-ray disc, works as a coaster as well. Let me also, I think, let's see how we're doing here. Let me see, I think we have now on the chat, I think as I'm clicking on stuff, if this is working right, I should be able to, let's pull up the keyer here. And yes, we now have live chat going on here. All right, so Andre says, "How's your download disc picture going?" It's going fine. I'm not sure where that's going. One thing we are certainly doing is we're also so we've got the fastest internet connection that any of the internet companies know how to make to our location right now, and honestly, it's about 20 times the speed that we used to pay $500 a month for back in when we first moved into San Jose. But even then, we're greedy. We would always want faster internet. So if you ever are in a point where, like, we release a new version and we tell thousands and thousands of customers, hey guys, please download this many gigabytes thing. If the downloads run a little slow for you, we ask you a little bit of patience. Come back in the next day if everyone in the universe is hitting things at the exact same moment and it's a little slow. That said, we are doing what we can to get even faster internet here, but we're doing pretty good, all things considered. All right, so let's see here. Hello from Belgium. Nice. Okay. So, and do a quick refresh. All right, so other things I wanted to get to today. Auction news. It's been a really interesting couple of weeks for Heritage Auctions. I haven't had enough time to talk about it lately. So let me go ahead, and I think I've even got this rolling. So let me go... Oh my goodness, the graphics. So, sorry, before I get into the auction stuff, I finally... for a number of weeks, I've been trying to get all these little pieces of the studio kind of together. And one of the pieces that was really hard to do was getting the Stream Deck program. So Stream Deck is a little control panel with about 15 buttons on it where you can program what all the buttons do. Basically, think of it as a macro pad for people who do streaming. And where it comes into play a lot for us is in switching between all the different camera angles, queuing graphics, getting them to fade off screen, and things like that. We've almost had this running for about 4 shows now, and it's the first time we've actually gotten things where they're actually kind of happening for us. So I'm pretty chuffed about that. Anyway, so I should be able to show your chats as they come in and clear them down so that they're not, sitting on screen while we're doing millions of other things as we go. All right, back to auction news. So, been an interesting number of weeks for Heritage Auctions. I do mean to write up a new auction report on the latest comings and goings over the last month. I'm a little behind on that. I beg your forgiveness. It's been busy. But a couple of things that are really interesting that came out of the last ones. I'll start with, let me go ahead and switch and queue up some graphics here for you. Let's go and let's start with this guy. I think that is right there. That is page 31, I believe, of Action Comics. It's Action Comics #1, so, the comic that gave us the first appearance of Superman. Page 31 is being sold just as page 31. It literally was ripped out of the comic page. This isn't a comic book by any stretch of the imagination. This is one page from a comic book. I guess page 32 is on the back of it, but I guess they weren't saying what was on the back. But anyway, it appears to be, as I'm looking at the condition of this one, in, I don't know, maybe good condition. There's a fair amount of paper browning on it and everything else, but it features a cowboy of some sort. There is nobody important on this comic. It's not even really a comic. It's a page from a very important comic book. If I'd actually had a copy of Action Comics #1 from 1938, as we all know, it'd be good for a good, that 10-cent investment in 1938 would be good for a cool 2.4 million, give or take, in today's value. As it turns out, this one page, many years later, apparently is worth about $660 as of Heritage Auction's last auction. It's the first time I've ever seen anything remotely like this come up for sale. I thought that was fascinating. We have no way of incorporating it in the database. Again, what do you do with part of a comic book? The mind reels. Other things that were very interesting about the latest auction report. Let me get over to those. Let's have a look at this guy. All right, Classics Illustrated, William Tell. A lot of you guys will know Classics Illustrated as the... gosh, if you're of a certain age, and I'm going to say a certain age meaning you grew up anywhere from, you were in school anywhere from the 1940s to 1975 or so, I'm going to say is about the era where Classics Illustrated was just everywhere in the high schools, elementary schools, and whatever else. And what it was an attempt by the Gilberton company to trick kids into learning, to read good books by putting them in comic book form. The same way that people trick kids into reading the Bible by adapting it into comic book form, which a lot of the old that's actually the origin of EC Comics came out from the before they went into horror and things like that. They started working on Bible adaptations. That was, I think they were education. I'm not sure if they were entertaining or educational comic books back in the very early 40s when they were into that before Tales from the Crypt rolled along. But anyway, Gilberton. That was the publisher here, came up with Classics Illustrated, where he would adapt everything from William Tell, Frankenstein, the Red Badge of Courage, Crime and Punishment, you name it, all these great works of literature into comic form. They tend to run about, I want to say about 48 pages, lots of words in them, frankly. It was not the fastest reading, but it was good stuff where if you were starved for entertainment, you would go through a lot of these. And they printed millions and millions and millions of them. Matter of fact, the printing history of these got so complicated. Well, to start with, the only way for a very long number of years you would even know what printing of a Classics Illustrated you have was by looking at the order form on the back of all the issues. where every time you bought a Classics Illustrated, you could flip it over, and there was a coupon where you could circle all the numbers of the other issues you wanted to buy, and you send that in along with $1 or $2 or whatever else to the Gilbert Publishing Company, and they would send you back more copies of Classics Illustrated. And depending on what they call it, the highest reorder number, or the HRN, whatever the largest number on the back of that form was, that gave you a clue as to what printing you had of whatever comic you were looking at. It wasn't until, I want to say, halfway through the 70s where somebody went and slavishly, and I do mean this was just an effort of heroic comic indexing, came up with what the Grand Codex was of what printing or what order number corresponded to which printing of all these hundreds of books. All told, I want to say there's something like 3,500 printings and issues to worry about where they all slotted in. And that was one of the very first things we get in ComicBase 2 or 3 or so that we were just very, very pleased to have been able to incorporate into our work. Anyway, but going back to this, these things were common as dirt. You saw them everywhere. They were kept in, wherever you went in your high school or your elementary school for, when you got done with your worksheets early, they were always, kept in a bookshelf, that had been read over 900 times, by kids, just looking again for entertainment, and they're, ordered by the bundles. Anyway, so they were everywhere, absolutely ubiquitous, and it took a long time for them to become collectible, but once they did become collectible, people wanted to get the whole set, or at least as close to it as they could. And moreover than that, it became very interesting to try to get the first printings, the elusive first printings. One thing that's really interesting about one of these latest Heritage auctions is the first printings of these ones, including some ones that just aren't that interesting as a property. We're going for just staggering amounts of money, much, much higher than previous sales would have indicated, which is part of a trend that we're seeing a lot when we're looking at more recent auction stuff, of seeing that kind of junk comic books are really going nuts. The superheroes are doing about what you think they do, but the ones, the forgotten comics of yesteryear, of the 1940s and 50s, are just going through the freaking roof. Let me see if I can get back to some of the high points on this one. So, for instance, the one we were just looking at here, the William Tell. I want to say that was issue number 101 of Classics Illustrated. That one there, we would have expected. It was very late in the series. It was really, and again, massive print runs in the millions sometimes for these things. We would have expected to go for something around $22, for a new one of that one. Instead, it sold for the equivalent of $180. Number, let me pull over to, let's get to, what's the next one on there? The Hurricane. All right, they're classics, right? But a lot of times that just meant old books. Not necessarily great works of undying literature in today's thinking. That one there, we would have thought it was again a throwaway issue from later in the series. We expected to go for less than $10. That one turned in for over 120. It basically went for for 1,700% of the expected amount. When you went earlier in the series, some of the more classic works on it. You regularly were seeing auction reports in this last one. They were coming in 3-4 times at least higher than we expected on the other ones. So the Classics Illustrateds, I'm going to say, I think we need to give them another real look as an overall series, particularly the first printings. And that's going to be something that we evaluate as we're going forth and we'll probably get some of that action cross-checked and into this next week's content update. Now, if we want to talk about some real junk, Candy was it? Candy was a teen humor magazine put up by a company called Comics Magazines in the 1940s and 1950s. This is the era that gave us Archie originally. It's a lot of jokes about kids eating a lot and looking at girls and staying out late and cheering for the making mistakes when they're running football plays. I mean, very innocent stuff, very, very low key, very, very inoffensive. Kind of sweet, maybe a little bit, but honestly, as forgettable as it comes from, no properties came out of Candy, from comics magazines that anyone remembers today, not even comic historians. Nevertheless, it soldiered on for 8 years or so. Went from 1947 to 1956. The funny thing again is, and we're seeing this again and again, is a lot of these comic books that were just the junk book, the junk box comics that in your retailer's store. It was like something that somebody who had a bunch of comics from the 1940s, and it was nothing that anyone cared about. There were no Batmans, there were no Supermans. Honestly, there were no Archies, for God's sake. But there were a bunch of just the random comic they happened to buy back in the 1940s. Those comics used to be something that you would throw in the $10 and under box, and you'd thank God if anyone ever went and grabbed them. Those things are now starting to turn into some real money. So anyway, Candy, to take an example of this one, let me just look down at my cheat sheet on it. Up 240% from, 2,400% from what we expected of it. We expected to go for about $15. Again, it's a nothing late run, model of a nothing series. We expected to go for about $15 based on previous sales of it. Went for the equivalent of $340 at the most recent auctions. And again, something we're seeing a lot of in this sector. So I would say, by and large, if you've got junk kicking around in your closet of this kind of ilk, again, properties no one has heard of, worth another look. This would be a really good time if you know someone who's got their attics to go cleaning out to do some bargain shopping before this stuff gets snapped up. Because the second this stuff all gets snapped up, shoved over into CGC, and stuck in a vault forever, the bargains will be gone. That's the way the stuff tends to go. All right, let's have a quick look at the chat here. Always saw these at yard sales. Yeah, let me go. Agent DeCamp. Sorry, I gotta scroll down on this one here. That's interesting. So I've got one thing that's a little bit tricky about the setup I'm doing right here is I've got to watch two chat streams at once, and they're not always synced with each other. So yeah, we're working on it. All right, so let me go a little bit out of sequence here. Andre was mentioning was mentioning. And let me turn back on the stills. There we go. So Andre's mentioning download is a very large one, takes time to monitor. Andre made a very interesting point about transmitting large picture archives, where he's suggesting going over BitTorrent. Can I have a quick show of hands from the chat stream of who just randomly, this is thoroughly unscientific, in the chat audience here, if we were to distribute things like picture images via torrent, how many of you guys would know what the heck we were doing and maybe have a client that could receive it? I'll settle for a quick, yeah, I get it, know what the heck's a torrent. I'll be honest about it. It's like, I think a lot of us have used torrents for, to download things that maybe we shouldn't be downloading. Whether it's, foreign, versions of TV series that we're not allowed to on our stream, or something else. Anyway, it's my expectation, and this could be my age showing here, is that if I show this to random comic-based customer, a lot of them may not know what to do with a torrent file. So BitTorrent, if you guys want to know the kind of the technical end between it, there is a problem with, frankly, folks in positions like ours, where anyone who's serving up just a ton of content, where it's all going to get hit at once, you're limited by, it's called your upstream bandwidth. However big your pipe is to the internet, if enough people pound on you at the same time, everything's going to crawl to a halt for a little while. Everyone will just be, you only get, to get a little tiny part of the available bandwidth, and if everyone's hitting at the same time, things take a long time. BitTorrent was a really ingenious idea, and I'll think of, gosh, am I getting this right? Was it Bram Cohen who came up with it? I'll think, if it's, no, I'll think of the right name of the guy in a minute. But it's an ingenious way to solve the problem of how do you share up large files that a lot of people want at the same time. And what it did was it basically invented a protocol where anyone downloading something had to give up a certain percentage of their download path themselves to serve up the next part of that file to the next guy who wanted one. And so what happens is, instead of one or two guys serving up all the disk images or all the main files from one or 2 points, everyone who became a downloader also became an uploader. And so their bandwidth got added to a pool, basically, and these pools would then get aggregated, and they would basically, the more people downloading something, the faster it was for everyone to to download themselves, because everyone was doing a little bit of uploading as part of their downloading. And it's funny because even though my location here might be limited to a certain number of gigabits up, the combined swarm of the whole universe, right? If every one of them has a little part of the file at once and can serve it up, the combined swarm speed can be fantastically huge. So my experience with this is, number one, is it tends to be kind of geeky. In other words, not at all mom and dad friendly. If I were to tell my parents, like, yeah, you download a BitTorrent client, and then you go to the torrent and you click on the file, they'd be like, what? They would absolutely freak out. That's my experience with just they call it the mom acceptance factor. The other one about this one, which is a problem for me in terms of that goes, is that a lot of the biggest files we've got to serve up aren't, we've got, comic software is a great thing, but let's face it, we're nichey, right? There aren't as many people who want to download archives unless we're going to put them out there for free. But there aren't as many people who want, or who certainly are entitled to download archives of Blu-ray archive editions, as there are who want to download, the latest episode of Big Bang Theory. It's one of those things where, like, unless it's kind of a popular sort of medium where you have a good chance that there's a lot of people serving it up, it tends not to add a lot to the whole thing. Basically, what happens is, home base winds up doing most of the work anyway, unless there's enough people who are downloading at the same time who can also add to the pile. So unless you've got many thousands of people doing the downloading, it tends not to help that much. That's my take, but I'm going to say I could be wrong. I think this is worth a look, at least, because again, we are facing a problem where, like, the content downloads do get bigger and bigger, and we kind of have a question of, like, well, how do we serve it up? We can throw more and more bandwidth at it up to a certain point, but even Microsoft and Apple, as big as their server farms are, they get pounded after a while. Microsoft was kind of interesting in that, as part of the latest version of Windows updates, they've actually offered, I believe it's a default option, to make it so that when you were downloading Windows updates for your organization, would you like to, by default, essentially what it comes down to is get them off of a torrent that's hosted by other people who are downloading the same update in your organization. And so they were working on some kind of local torrent type of thing like that. I think it's really interesting. It might even be a solution, but I don't know. Let me have a quick look and see what people think. Use it to download the entire Linux distro. Yes, absolutely, that would make sense. And John P points out torrents are only good for speed if you have enough seeders on it. Yes, I absolutely agree. And Robbie says not a clue, which I also agree. Yeah, it's something we want to look at. And maybe there's some answers there. But let's keep it in mind. I'd say is my question on that, is my bit on that. All right, so let me get back to a couple other questions that we wanted to hit here. And it looks like we're probably going to be a little bit, we've run long the last few, so we might actually be a little shorter this time out, so we might be making it up a little bit, unless we get a bunch of questions from y'all. All right, but let me talk about some other things here. One question that came in for us, and let me go ahead and clear your graphics here, which I think I even have this ready to roll. No, I did that wrong. I knew I'd mess something up. Okay, let me just go ahead and do it that way. There you go. Clear down the graphics that way. So I've almost got this completely slicked out on the Stream Deck thing, but you still, it's the guy with the two ears in the middle of your stream that's going to do most of the messing up here. Anyway, so back to what I want to talk about. A question that did come in is a customer called up just yesterday and said, well, hey, I've been getting the updates as I go every week in terms of the new pictures that come out. And if you guys have been watching the little update scoreboard we put out on the newsletter, you see that we push out almost 1,000 new pictures every single week. So leave Sidekick on, let your machine do the work for you. Because one of the best ways to always have to get everything downloaded and not have to worry about it is just have Sidekick doing a little bit every week, and that's never a big problem. Anyway, but he's been doing this all through the year. He got his new Blu-ray disc for the quarter and says, well, is there even a point of me downloading this new Blu-ray disc? I would say yes. The reason is, if you'll notice that anything that comes down off the servers is a part of a download, because it came off, the internet world on that whole thing, it comes down with a very, very subtle Atomic Avenue watermark on it. And so when you do get the Blu-ray edition, there's two things that are a little better. Or for that matter, when you get the yearly DVD archive editions and you download the picture archives from there as opposed to getting them as part of the weekly cover download, is, first of all, they don't have that little watermark on them. Again, barely perceptible. A lot of people have used the program for years and never noticed it was there. But if you did notice, it's like, oh, okay, I'd rather have the picture without the watermark. And then the second part is Blu-ray folks, remember, they're allowed to get things up to 4K resolution. And so when you're downloading a cover of any type, it's going to be capped at, it's about 1,000 pixels tall. So it's basically, it's at full size if you're running on a 96 DPI screen. But that is whether or not you're a Blu-ray customer or an archive customer, you get that size picture. If you are downloading it straight off the Blu-ray, on the other hand, you get it at up to 4K resolution if we've got it. So if you can get it off the Blu-ray disc, it's probably going to be a little bit nicer picture. So I'd say, yeah, it's worth running the installer. Is kind of like the short version of that overly long answer just now. All right, talking about updates. All right, so last thing I wanted to hit, and this is just sort of a general question I had. It's more of sorry, I'm just taking a quick look down at the thing here. Line very good. School have physical versions of things. Okay. All right. Okay. So we are, as I mentioned last time, and let me go ahead and put up. Let me put up one other thing if I can get to her. I want to go to here, and this should be, that is me. Okay, if you guys don't have this before, that is my personal email address, so that goes straight to me as opposed to anyone else in the company. As I mentioned in the last couple shows, we are we're kind of turning the corner here, working towards the next major version of ComicBase. So that's going to be, let me go ahead down and clear down the chat. That's going to be codenamed Crystal Palace, and it'll probably have a very boring year name at the end of it, but we keep our options open till the end. Anyway, Crystal Palace, we have a number of cool new things planned for it. It's a developing kind of deal, but this is the time of the year when we start working on the new thing, and the old thing kind of moves a little bit into more of a support mode. So if anything comes up that we need to address, we'll address it, but we start really, throwing some weight behind making the new versions of stuff that, we want to handle. So two things. Number one, I was sharing my email address with you because if you'd like to be part of that project and join the Slack team, what that is it's an internal chat tool we use, so you actually get to hang out with the developers as we're building the thing, see all the new development builds, put in comments in real time on what we're doing, tell us what's working for you, what doesn't work for you, and so forth. If you want to be part of that effort, this is the last time I'm going to ask for it, because honestly, we're up and running at this point, and we could use a few more folks who are going to, add something to the project. But honestly, we're good. But I wanted to, put this out there one last time, which is to say, if you'd like to be part of the project, send a note to pbickford@human-computing.com and say, give me your name, your email address, and preferably also an email address that's tied to a Dropbox account. And if not, I'll send you a sign up for Dropbox. But that's the way that we share a lot of the internal builds. But anyway, what this does, if you'd like to be part of it, is lets you get in on it's not even the ground floor. It's while we're still building the floors of the new version. So you'll get to see it, the whole thing under construction as we go. It is an internal group. And one thing, this is actually the last time I'm probably going to talk a lot about Crystal Palace until we ship Crystal Palace. At an unspecified time, and they're probably not too far, from now future. But if you want to be on the inside and be part of those kind of internal decisions, this is a good time to kind of get invited, like behind the firewall, because for various reasons, there are things that once you're kind of like bunkered down working on a new project, you can't share every hammer blow or every new beam that you put up. You can't share that, and put out press announcements about here's what we're doing. There's some practical reasons for it. I've learned the hard way that once anyone knows that, well, one of two things can happen when you're building a new product, right? Both of them are bad. One is if people say, wow, the new product is going to be great. It'll answer all my dreams. Whatever I used to, hate about the old one, it'll be so much better. I can't wait till it comes out. At which point everyone will wait until it comes out. That's no good for me, right? Because we're a company, we can't, even though our season is a little bit like farming, where there's certain periods right after you ship where things come in much hot and heavier than when you are doing your building and your planting. You don't want that to be an all or nothing kind of proposition. So we we're being very kind of open about the development process, but we're going to shut up. Pretty much. This is kind of like the last warning before the shutting up begins of what we're thinking about doing of the new one. So that's, if you get, excited about it, that's the whole thing. And of course, the other one is, we could, tell you, well, we're going to do something here, it'll make, this thing and that thing and the other thing a little bit better than it is now, and it'll be a nice solid release or anything, at which point you might yawn and say, like, I'm completely, bored and unimpressed. I'm not even going to wait for the next version. I'm just going to walk away and be bored. Either way, so like I say, it never helps a company to talk too much about what we're going to be doing. The only thing we're ever going to talk about is the stuff we've already done that you can actually go out there and buy. So that's kind of general business advice that I've kind of learned the hard way, and I'm going to get right back to following starting right now. But with that said, I do want to talk just sort of philosophically about the idea of just sort of like what things do you want to see just in general as we go forward. I'm going to have a little bit more of some thoughts on this one later on. I'm not going to share a lot about it right now, but I do want to share some thoughts about just some really little things which cause a lot of friction for folks. And there are things like just downloading an update. Any update, if we're doing, going from version 20.0.2 to 20.0.3 as we did last week, I'm thinking, that process could be smoother. The good news is we don't get a lot of tech calls on it anymore. That it used to be a real problem for us. You guys might remember that one of the big things we did when we did the ComicBase 2020 series is we stopped making updaters, which ironically makes updating much easier. So it used to be that we'd ship a version of ComicBase, ComicBase 2015 or something like that, and then there'd be a 2015 version, whatever, would be like 19.0.1 updater or something, or I forget what version number was associated with it, but there'd be a little 0.0.1 updater with it, and the first one would run and it would run just fine. You download the updater and say, great, it's updated, you're done. The problem we would always have is that you couldn't update the updater. And so once you'd installed the 19.0.1 updater, to install the 19.0.2 updater, right, you had to uninstall the previous 19.0.1 updater, because one of them was making, it wasn't just patching the original program, it was, updating a whole bunch of files. So it wasn't, it was much more complicated than the sort of work that usually goes to, say, update your web browser, because we're not just updating one thing, we're changing, dozens of things typically. And unfortunately, with that kind of installer-based updater, it's a one-shot, and if it's not, you have to uninstall and reinstall. So we got so much text, we're like anyone else. After a while, you just kind of say, look, where where are all the hurts in my life? Where are all the things that are causing us trouble? And you try to make those things go away because, you'd like to have more things that, are fun in your life. So if we're doing anything that confuses the heck out of you guys, we try to make it so we stop doing that. That's not any good. So one of the things we learned the hard way is that if we ever thought we'd get in a position where we'd put out an update and then there might be you need to uninstall before you install the new updater, we had to stop doing that. So in ComicBase 2020, everything we do is now a full install. So what that means is that all the updaters are much larger. So if you've got an archive edition, you need to download the new archive edition, you're downloading 700 megs. But it always works, right? You're not downloading a patch for ComicBase, 20.0.1. You're downloading the whole version of 20.0.1. But it also means that you can do the same thing and it will always run. And that's very similar to what, I guess Apple does this with their software updates. It always feels like if they change like two things in their, in their Mac OS builds, you download the software update for like an hour and you install it for like half an hour and then you're good to go. And it's like, well, what'd you change? Oh, yeah, we clarified the licensing agreement. It's always something silly like that. Now, look, the truth is that they also are like us. They've changed a lot of little things to a lot of different files, and so you can't just patch them because managing the patch becomes unwieldy. But I always thought for the longest time that the sort of thing where you had to download a massive thing in order to change a little thing, that always seemed out of line. We've changed our minds, honestly. It feels like everyone's internet connections has gotten fast enough that that's an easier hit to take than to have any kind of confusion about how you install it. Now, with all this preamble aside, I think we could do better. For instance, I talked to a customer, good guy, long-time customer. He's still back on version 20.0.1 or something like that, and we were trying to get him up to 20.0.3. And there's some little glitches in the 20.0.1 thing that we fixed ages ago. It was 6 months ago, and I'm like, geez, man, why didn't you download the other thing? We sent you enough newsletters on it, and then you're kind of caught between, well, I don't know. Did he ever get those newsletters? Because a lot of people say, yeah, I get too much spam in my life. I can't handle all these people sending me marketing stuff, whatever else. And so all it takes is for one time in your life, you need to get, let's say, a ComicBase news flash, and just, if you are like a Yahoo user and you just say, heck with those guys, mark as spam, what happens is, effectively, Yahoo puts up a permanent spam block on your address from us. We don't get to send you anything at that point unless you go back through another process and opt back in again. And honestly, they're going to block all mail to all Yahoo addresses if anything more than like 1 or 2% of people ever mark anything we've ever sent as spam. And it doesn't need to be, it isn't that we've just cooked up random addresses and are sending random things out. No, this is all stuff that people at one point or enough said, yeah, sure, send me the newsletter. But just on a given day, if more than 1 or 2% people say, yeah, enough with you guys. I get too much stuff. I'm having a hard day at work. I'm feeling, this is feeling spammy to me today. It doesn't need to be personal. You could have read the headline and just felt that way. But if more than 1 or 2% of people ever hit that, it's junk mail thing, suddenly the ability to send to anyone on Yahoo or anyone on Hotmail gets completely compromised. And so we've got a real problem on our hands. So if you wonder, for instance, why didn't we send a newsletter out before this podcast? It's because, hey, among other things, we don't want to trigger anyone's spam reaction. We don't want to wear out our welcome, and it doesn't take much to wear out a welcome. So, back to our friend here who had ComicBase 20.0.1, who's using stuff with bugs in it we fixed 6 months ago. Well, all right, once upon a time, he might have hit that, this is junk mail to something we sent, in which case it just stopped sending to him. And the same thing works if you ever, instead of hitting the junk mail thing in your email program, if you actually hit the unsubscribe, we're not fooling around. We take you off the list, for whatever that thing is. If you ever hit that unsubscribe thing at the bottom of the link. So anyway, the long and the short of all this is it's getting hard for us to tell folks when stuff is new, better, fixed, etc. Right? And that doesn't have a lot to do with how frequently we send it out or how junky our stuff is. I don't think. What it has to do with just is that everyone else in the universe who's sending junk all the time, it just wears people down, and so they just get to the point where they just want to say, no mas, I can't take it anymore. But the long and the short of it for us is the email becomes really unreliable for us as a communications medium. And so we can't know that just because we said, oh, by the way, there's this urgent fix that was put out, or hey, there's a really great deal that's going out, everything is half off for the next 12 hours, whatever the heck we have to say to you. We don't necessarily know that that message ever got to you just because we sent it to you, or just because we wanted to send it to you. It could be delayed by a million different things. It can get filed in a million different junk folders. You might have unsubscribed, 6 years ago because you just weren't feeling like, the love that day or whatever else. And there really are times when we do have something kind of important, when we do want to be able to say, hey, really, you really want to download this updater because it'll really make your life better. Because I hate it when I'm talking to a customer and he's frustrated because he's been dealing with something for 6 months that we fixed 6 months ago. That's no fun. So what I'm thinking, and I'd like to get your reaction on this, is twofold. One is, in addition to, again, trying to be as courteous with email and everything else that we can, what do you guys think if we put more of this kind of messaging in the program itself? And what I'm thinking of is something fairly subtle, such as when you've got, when there's a new update, say, available. If I look at what my iPad does, the default in iPad world is if there's a new update available, that if it's plugged in, if it's got plenty of battery life, it will download that update and it'll just kind of sit there waiting for me to install it. At which point, once it's all downloaded, it'll say, by the way, I have an update. Would you like to install it? Because it's right here. And that just gives me a one tap go. It's already been installed. I don't need to download the installer. I don't need to do whatever else. It's already cached all this in the back, in the background, so I'm not waiting for anything to do the work. Basically what it means is I just kind of find something else to do for 5-10 minutes while my iPad updates itself. And then I say, well, something happened. I guess it's the new version. But more, I guess more of the point is, it only asked me one decision, and it made the decision very, very straight. It just said, there's an update. Do you want it? It has something that we think is important. Do you want to update? And you just say yes or no. What do you guys think about doing more stuff that way? Would that feel intrusive to you? So for instance, if we rigged Sidekick out and we had Sidekick automatically download program updates, so they were sitting there waiting for you in some temporary folder on your hard drive, so that the very next time you launched ComicBase, and if there was a program update that had come out and said, hey, there's a new update available, do you want to use it, do you want to install it right now? And it would install it and maybe delete the updater when it's done. Is that a good thing or a bad thing for y'all? I want to get your gut reaction, because people sometimes feel very differently about this stuff than I would. I guess I'm feeling like this would be helpful for me, and I know a lot of companies, do it this way. I think it would solve a problem for us, but does that feel like, it can also feel like, we're taking over your device, or we're doing something that's not quite on the up and up. What's just gut check. What's everyone think about, doing stuff like that? And let me quickly look at the chat and see what reactions are coming in. Agent DeCamp says, I always stay up to date. Let me actually use my chat here. This is, by the way, I'm using software here called H2R, which is really, really cool. But it's this is, I think I mentioned this before, is the guy who makes it, a guy named John, oh gosh, I'm blanking on his name, John Bickford? John, anyway, but he apparently can't get a hold of an API key for Google that allows him to hit, to have all his customers hit refresh as much as they need to and not expire his Google API. And so that's a real problem for him. Jet City Comics says, seems like a good idea. Jeff, look, so it looks so far pretty positive. All right, so that's encouraging. All right, so that is another thing. All right, and now having gone through some of this, let me push my luck ever so slightly further and ask this. If we're not using it just for random crap, right? So we're not using this just to annoy you. Honestly, if we're doing stuff that is just there to annoy you, we suck anyway. We shouldn't be doing it. But if we're using it for stuff that is at least somewhat interesting, Would it be overly intrusive to you guys, do you think, if we put a little notification bell or something like that in the program? And by that I mean like a little icon up at the top someplace that says, you know, there's new notes for you or something, which just kind of give you a quickie, you know, 1 or 2 sentence, you know, hey, there's a new this available. Hey, we're we're running a special on that. You know, we just shipped you this, whatever the thing is. But what if we took some of that communication that we would normally be sending over email and took it out of email, or at least email was more or less our backup, and what we would do is more or less communicate directly through the program to you. On the back end, what would happen is we would basically say, hey, if you're logged in the program, you know, we know who you are because you're logged in, you're a single person with your serial number and your login, right? But what we do is when you log in, we'd say, just like we check for updates, you know, we'd say, hey, is there any new messages for this guy? And so when we send out certain types of announcements, and they'd be things like, we've just pushed the 20.0.4 update or something like that, and maybe it's general or maybe it's specific to you, we would just say something like, you know, hey, there's a new announcement, and you would just, you know, tick it to say, you just click it, you know, and you'd say like, yeah, I got it, I don't got it, or click here for more info or whatever else. But it'd be a one and done kind of deal. So just a little like kind of notification / message center in the program itself. That would launch, you know, and it'd just be like an icon at the top or something like that just might draw your attention, but it isn't going to bling at you or put up a big alert or anything like that. But just something where we take that more of that messaging and kind of make it more direct, so that when you're using the program, we get to at least say, hey, look, we tried to tell you. Is that intrusive? Is it garbage, or is it a good idea? What do folks think? Okay. Okay, Brian, go ahead and put these back on. There's some questions about torrents here. Let's see. Update. Not have to look for one update or not. Let's see here. Okay, there's more talking about updates here. Rob saying I use that for the Mac application all the time. It's fine. Scott, okay, so now we're into talking about the notifications. Scott seems to feel like, okay, yeah, things to do is fine with me. All right, Andre says, not for me. I started ComicBase. I'm going to time to be a kid again. Everything related. Fair enough, man. Andre, let me ask you particularly, what if the show notifications was optional? And now I'm thinking out loud. I'm not sure if I'm saying that, if it's a good thing. What if, all right, let me put it this way. What if there was a one-click get rid of everything? Everything whatever you were thinking of, I'm done. I've read it. It's like so there's a little bell at the top that it lights up black or something like that to say there's something new here. You click on it and you just mark all as read. And if that thing never went off more than about once, maybe twice a month tops, is that still a pain in the butt or not? Again, just I'm not trying to convince anyone one way or another. I just honestly, I'd like just gut checking on this. Jeff says I can ignore is fine with me. Doug's in. Larry sounds good. Andre says, I mean, not a problem. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay. All right. Cool. All right. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. This has been valuable for me. Like I said, I don't want to get too much into what we're planning, except in very, very broad terms. All right, let me go a little bit in broad terms of what we're thinking of with Crystal Palace. And by the way, while we're at it, it gives me a chance to at least show off. If I can flip over to, let me go. Oh, hang on a second. I did one dumb thing. So I wish I could show it to you on my setups for the Stream Deck here. I was doing really good on the whole thing. If you could see my, actually I think you can see my desk. Let me see if I can get the overhead running. So this is my desk, right? And if I pull it out here, this little guy over on the right here, this is my Stream Deck, right? So this was going great guns, and then we have our, I think if I pull any further, I'm going to lose the whole feed. But there's a big video switcher that's just out of view of the whole thing. Anyway, so I've got graphics here for like show graphics, 13, 14, 15, etc. One thing that I didn't do when I was setting everything up last night is I didn't do, I have a paging mechanism, because no matter how many buttons you've got on anything to work with, you always want more. Anyway, I wrote a paging mechanism in, which allowed me to go to the pages, and for the first 3 pages, I thought about it, and I put a page back. When I was setting this up at 2 in the morning this morning, I didn't think when you got to the very end of this one, when I was putting my last few buttons in, I didn't put a page back in. As a result, I'd have to launch a separate piece of software to page back from where I was. This will be that thing I work on next time. Alright, anyway, but let me go ahead for now and queue up the graphic I wanted to show you guys, which is, let me go back to that is me. And then if I put on the still, so that's Crystal Palace. That's our little working logo. Honestly, don't get carried away. It's not going to be the program logo or anything like that. Honestly, it's just the logo that's going to be on whatever T-shirt we distribute to folks who are working on the projects. But anyway, so I just like it because I think the guy we hired to do the logo did a great job on it. Anyway. The general theme, there's big releases and there's little releases. Guys, after ComicBase 2020, which we spent 4 years on, we are not, no way in heck are we doing a big release. Not 2 in a row. I am, by the way, on Friday, I am finally going to be on the beach that I promised myself for 4 years that when I got done shipping ComicBase 2020, I would be laying on. So I'm heading down. I'm not going to get off to Tuvalu or any place really cool. I'm just heading down to Florida, but I'm going to work on a suntan or a sunburn because I'm Irish. And we'll be doing that, when you see me next time, I'll probably be considerably redder than I am now. But anyway, no, the next the next release of ComicBase we're not going to try to revolutionize every single thing under the sun. This is not that build. What we are going to try to do though is 2 things. I want to always make it so that anything that's just annoying you with the program stops annoying you. Just anything that just it takes too long to do this, it's a pain in the butt to do that. As many of those things as we can make go away, I want to make them go away. And if you have any sorts of ideas for things like that, I do want to run a show either next time or the time after that, where all we do is talk about things that annoy you with ComicBase, which should be absolute death from a marketing standpoint. Because they, any one of my competitors can then, go, I guess, if they possess rudimentary video editing skills, they can clip the whole thing up and we can make our own ads against ourselves or something. I don't know. We'll do something. But anyway, that's it. Look, I seriously, I want to make sure, even if it's just something like, I never understood this term in the program, I never understood this dialogue, why do I have to click 3 times to do this? Whatever those things are, I want to make as many of those go away as possible. That's number 1. Number 2, anything that is causing tech support for us, I want to make it go away if possible. So this is why I was asking you guys about the mail and about the updates. Are there things we can do to make those smoother and more easier to do without having to think about it? That is a high priority for me. Beyond that, it is a major release, so there are going to be new features. And feature-wise, the thing that in particular we're looking on doing is some neat new stuff involving data analysis and valuations on your collection. So you saw that we done a lot, we talking about auction reports and things like that. We're taking the values of comics very, very seriously. Not only that we are trying to base all our stuff in reality in terms of where the prices come from and in tracking your investments as if they were investments, but we also, along with that, want to be able to give you more kinds of reporting that you can use to do everything from your insurance reports to tracking how trends have played out, over time, both for your own collection and for individual comics and so forth. So you're going to see a lot of stuff along those themes. I'm not going to get into the specifics, but that is, when you're talking about the themes of an update, that's one of the major themes of what we're doing. There's going to be some modernizations to basically all the areas of the program in at least small ways. But in terms of like the guts of what we're changing behind the scenes, it has to do more or less with allowing us to do more things that get a little bit more analytical with the data. That's probably, whether it's sexy or not, that's where some of the heavy lifting is going. Now, at the end of the day, it's funny because I have all this very serious stuff to talk about with that, and at the same time, I have some really like just cool stuff where like, hey, this doesn't sound very serious at all, but man, is it flashy. I have some stuff like that I'll be talking about when we get a little closer, and actually launch the program. But so there will be some eye candy as well. Anyway, I am interested very much in your thoughts on all this thing, and I'll take it from there. Let me do one last check of the chat before we park off here. Beaches and beers. Oh, hell yeah. Jet City Comics. Absolutely. Let's see here. Rob said handheld scanner worked great. John says liking the new version so far. Excellent. And Larry says thanks for including us. And all right, guys, thank you. I really appreciate this. And despite the fact that it's like a 28-step, oh good lord, it's like a 35-step checklist to go live on these things, I'm really having fun with doing the live stream with you guys. And thank you so much for showing up on this one. I hope to see you all next time. And in the meantime, I'll come back and I'll probably be a bit more sunburned. You guys have a great weekend. I know I'm going to. We're going to try parasailing for the first time ever, and hopefully it won't end up like if you want to have fun, Google up parasailing Panama City Beach, Florida, and look at the very first YouTube result. I'm gonna hope that is not us. So anyway, guys, thank you so much. We'll see you.